Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Shelby and I am a health and fitness coach. I am so excited that you're here today because today I'm talking about a topic that I think is so important and one that I don't think is talked about quite enough when it comes to the fitness space. So today we're going to talk a little bit about pelvic floor health. So I am not a pelvic floor PT, I am not specialized in this, but what I am sharing is a personal experience that I am doing currently. I am 5 months and a couple weeks pregnant, so I'm almost 6 months actually, like now that I think about it. And so I am very interested in making sure that I am doing what I need to do in terms of my pelvic floor health and trying to stay on top of that. And so I'm really excited to announce that I am partnering with a company called Bloom. Make sure that I'm allowed to say that. So I'm participating with Bloom to work on a pelvic floor program essentially. And so what Bloom has done is essentially given me a pod that is a Bluetooth pod that is helping to measure my pelvic floor contractions and relaxations. And so if you're not familiar with pelvic floor health or pelvic floor PT or anything, or like what is that? First, what I'm gonna do is just put a picture up right here. This is your pelvic floor, and the pelvic floor is actually made up of a lot of muscles. I don't think you guys can see that because Hunter was behind the photo, but he was just doing some stretching, so it was just really funny, it caught my eye. But so essentially your pelvic floor is, think of your pelvic girdle, right? The bones that make up your pelvis. And between those bones is actually a set of muscles. And those muscles are what help you to contract and relax and brace and whatnot. And if you think about if you've ever had to hold it because you have to go to the bathroom, right? Those are your pelvic floor muscles working. And so the best description, and this is actually what my contact with Bloom used when we were first chatting, was think of a can, right? And I happen to have a can of Liquid Death, which is canned water. My friend and I were trying it. So this is not an ad for them, but this just works really well because it's a can and it's a great description. So if you think about your core, right, as the can, and then you've got your diaphragm and your pelvic floor that basically make up the top and bottom of the can. And so as one is moving up and down, the other moves with it, right? So when your diaphragm comes up, your pelvic floor actually comes up with it, and vice versa, it goes down, right? Like when we breathe in and out. And you go through contractions and relaxation and whatnot. So we don't think about using our pelvic floor most of the time because until we have something that actually bothers it, it typically works well, right? Like you don't have issues with it. If you can hold it when you have to go to the bathroom and you're not, you know, having issues with leaking and whatnot, then like typically we think, okay, like my pelvic floor is working fine. And a lot of us do have the luxury of it working well, but pregnancy is a time that can greatly impact your pelvic floor health, right? And the efficiency of those muscles to do their job, right? So if we know that, we pay attention to it and say, okay, if we know that there's a baby in there, right, that's growing and growing and growing, and with that your uterus is expanding, it's going to be pressing down and up, right? We talked about that, you know, people feel like their baby's pressing up into their ribs and whatnot, and your organs and whatnot are moving up and down and getting out of the way for this baby to make room. It's also pushing down on your pelvic floor. And so if you think about it, think about something like a trash bag, right? And I thought of this example while I was kind of thinking through how I was going to talk about this today. But if you have one of those like trash bags that you put in your garbage bin at home, right, and it stretches, right? The material stretches to let stuff fit into it, which is great. It's supposed to do that. But when you take the stuff out of it, or if you empty it or whatever, right? And a lot of times we're not like re-emptying the bag and using it again, but go with it, right? So it's stretching and it's not going to go back into place, right? It's going to stay stretched out. And so if your muscles are stretching out and getting pushed and pushed and pushed, but then your uterus and everything goes back to normal size after you have the baby and you know, everything's contracting back, but those muscles are still kind of loose, they maybe aren't going to do what they need to do, right? They're not going to be able to contract like they need to and relax like they need to. And so that's when we tend to see a lot of women suffer from pelvic floor dysfunction, right? Where those muscles are not doing what they're supposed to do. So common symptoms of that, right, are having leakage, you know, when you are unable to hold it when you're trying to make it to the restroom. It could also be that when you're doing jumping exercises, right? Box jumps or double unders or catching a power clean, right? Those exercises and where we have to brace really heavy, right? Like a back squat or a deadlift, that we tend to see that women sometimes have issues with holding it, right? And there's no control there. We can see it sometimes when you sneeze, right? Like you sneeze, you're like, ooh, like that didn't go as I planned, right? So that's the most common symptom that most women are familiar with, is that incontinence or inability to hold it during times when you should be able to contract and brace. and stop that from happening. But there are other symptoms that happen too. It can be something like during sex, things not feeling super comfortable or the sensations not being super great. That's not one that people typically like to talk about, but it can be a sign of pelvic floor dysfunction. And there are a lot of other things that can happen too, but those to me are kind of like the big fish that we tend to want to, or that women are maybe a little bit more comfortable talking about, because they make a big difference in your life to have those things not be working properly, right? And again, pregnancy is something that so many women go through, right? Large majority of women will have a baby at some point over their lifetime. And so knowing that that is a common occurrence that happens, we want to make sure we can do something to address it. So insert pelvic floor PT here, right? So with Bloom, I am working in more of a preventative method. I did not have incontinence issues or anything prior to getting pregnant. But again, knowing that pregnancy is something that can cause that to happen pretty often, I wanted to be proactive. I'm very lucky. One of my coworkers' wives recommended me to this program. She is a pelvic floor PT. And so she had these connections and got me connected with them, which was great. It was something I wanted to look into anyways once I got pregnant. And then I happened to just have the right friends in the right places, which worked great. So obviously, as I go through this, I want to share a little bit more about how this works. Right now, what I'm doing is I have a Bluetooth device that basically can monitor my contractions and relaxation, and I'm working through things like holding contractions, working on things like agility, which is like a strong contraction and then relaxation. I'm working on different types of contraction in terms of power, so different levels of contraction, and then also working through just what that contraction should feel like when I'm doing diaphragmatic breathing, right, which is just like your deep breath using your diaphragm, right, breathing into your diaphragm. So that's kind of the level 1 that I'm at right now. I haven't done tons of sessions yet. I think I've done 5 or 6. And so with that, I just kind of want to give you guys kind of an update as I go through this on what's happening so far. So again, this isn't something that's just for somebody who's pregnant. It can be somebody who has been pregnant in the past. It can be somebody who has not had babies at all. And it can be somebody who maybe has issues due to something else, but you're still dealing with things like incontinence and whatnot, and you want to improve it. So once this trial that I'm doing with them is over, like once I get through all of the sessions I'm doing, I probably will be able to have some more information for you guys, but wanted to share a little bit about, one, if you're pregnant and or dealing with some of these things, that it's worth looking into, right? Finding a pelvic floor PT that is local to you, or an online program. There's lots of great people out there who work remotely, and they utilize things similar to what I'm doing with something that will measure those contractions and relaxations for you. 2, this isn't something that you should be worried about talking about as a woman, right? We want to be able to control our bladder. We want to be able to have, sex feel good and not feel weird, and that things feel like they're supposed to down there. And we don't want to have further issues happen where we can't sneeze without being like, oh gosh, am I okay, right? This is a normal part of life, and again, as a female going through having a pregnancy at some point, know that this is normal. So I wanted to share that, one, I'm doing it, and as a health and fitness coach, I think that it is something I would highly recommend that you look into if you either have had symptoms or feel like you're starting to have symptoms, and or plan to get pregnant in the future, are pregnant, or have had babies. It is totally great to do. Just like we are exercising, even if you're maybe not trying to lose weight or something, exercise is still good for your health. And so having good pelvic floor health is still kind of up there in that overall healthiness, right? Okay. Part 2 to this is that as I go through this journey, I know that I'm going to be doing more advanced exercises, and so I'm going to do a couple of update videos. I know I'll be getting into considered what's like level 2 and level 3 exercises in the next couple of weeks, and so once I've gotten through some of those, I'm going to share some updates on that as well. Again, right now it's just like I'm learning how to like contract and relax appropriately, how to hold those contractions and breathe through them, how to not strain and things like that, and it's been really helpful because even as somebody who coaches fitness and is very fit and focuses on lifting and whatnot, learning how to do those things appropriately matters, and having a way to actually measure it is super cool, especially from my home, right? Super comfortable. So if you have more interest in knowing more about pelvic health, pelvic floor health, and more about like how do I get into something like this, or if I'm having these symptoms, like what's my first step, you know, feel free to drop messages down below. I'm happy to chat more with other women that have been going through this kind of stuff, or are just looking to talk more about it, because I think it's something that's not talked about enough. And I will be doing updates as we go along. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe, so you can come hang out with me all the time. I'm a health and fitness coach, so I do like to share fitness and nutrition related content, but I also do other things too. I share lifestyle vlogs and travel vlogs. I'm a theme park junkie, so I do share whenever I go to the theme parks, mostly in Florida. Because that's just like my fun thing to do. And obviously I am pregnant, so I am sharing some stuff, not personal necessarily, but more so stuff about, you know, fitness and pregnancy and what that looks like for me. So feel free to join us along the way, right? We're having a good time, and we hope to see you next time. Bye.